Hello, hello! Welcome one, welcome all to another game with me. Now, we're up against another Zerg player here. We're up against I'm Burning. And I don't really remember this player's rank. I remember that he was a diamond player, but I don't remember if he was like a top 8 diamond or not. It wouldn't be surprising just because lately I've been going up a lot I've been going up against lots of top 8 diamond players and a lot of master players, but don't remember per se. So the last couple of games, we got a chance of looking at games against a Zerg player that went for hatch first, and even a Zerg player that went for a one base type of reared roach rush all-in thing. But we didn't really get a chance to look at a Zerg player that went for pool forced or 14 pool into a 15 hatch. And there are two types of variations that you have to keep in mind. Now, you won't really see this on ladder very much, so you don't really need to worry about it, but it's good to learn. So when somebody goes for gas, your opponent is going to be hitting you a little bit later with mass speedlings. If he's going without the gas, he'll be hitting a little bit earlier, but without speed. And we'll be scouting here. It's good to know that the pool finishes around 310-ish when somebody's going for this build. So the earliest your opponent can get Zerglings in is about 335, 340. And it takes a few seconds, like a dozen seconds, before they can get all the way over here. So what usually happens is that while your Marine actually enters the opponent's natural, they will encounter the Zergling just as he goes up the ramp. And you normally have enough time to go in all the way and scout your opponent throwing down his hatchery, or the hatchery being built, before the Marine gets taken out. So you will usually have scouting information. Now, just remember that you will always encounter the Zerglings at your opponent's main. You will not encounter them midfield like you would if you was going for a sort of one-base play, really early pool. Alright, so if your opponent is going for the gassless style, the opponent will normally be hitting around 5-ish. And this can be a little bit dangerous because I like throwing down my expo around 3. But if you're throwing it down at a standard time, 3:30, your expo might not be done. So you might need to fight on the low ground. Just keep that in mind. If your opponent is going for gas, then your opponent is going for, well, more or less a 5:30 attack type. If you want to hold this off, like here I wasn't sure what he was doing, so I didn't bother trying. If you want to hold this off, just build a couple more depots around the bunker. The depots don't really need to complete, just make sure that you throw them down and the AI will screw up the pathing and will not really get that much done. You can always still repair the bunker, it's always fun. Always fine that way. So our opponent is going to retreat, going to posture aggressively and blah blah blah. But we can really push this with a good amount of Marines. We don't really need that many. Another round would be okay. Like we have enough here. And already you can see that our opponent has sacrificed a lot of his economy to go for this sort of play. I mean, he's not really where he should be. I mean, we're not where we should be either. But just now is he getting his third. Doesn't really have that many workers. Right, and he's also posturing aggressively, keeping an eye on stuff on the minimap, just to make sure when we can attack. And always be careful when you push out, because a common transition for the opponent is to go for banelings. Maybe not a baneling all-in or anything, but it's not uncommon or unheard of for someone to go for early banelings. Now, in this game, our opponent is not. He's going for early +1/+1 instead. So I could have attacked here, but I opted not to, just because you never know. I'm going to opt to wait until combat chills finish. An opponent is wondering what I'm doing, so he's going to move out. And the purpose of this push, of any push that I do, is to deny the creep spread first, and to force out as many banelings as our opponent can. Because the moment you force your opponent to make banelings, he can't really be going for mutas for the spire, he can't really be going for early +1/+1. But since our opponent went for this early gas-heavy stuff, he doesn't really have enough resources to make banelings. Just 2, that's about it. And we have good position here, so our opponent does clean this up, but not the best baneling connections. Our opponent behind this, well, can't really put down some pressure, but he lost a lot of the creep spread. You can see he has no creep, it's all in the main, or the natural I should say. He lost some workers, a lot of workers, He lost the natural 2. And behind this, what do we have? We have +1/+1. We have our third on the way. We have stim on the way. So our opponent is a little bit far behind, but not as far as you would think, just because he has +2/+2 on the way while I have +1/+1. So as long as he can keep up the upgrade advantage, he'll be okay. He'll be in okay shape. Right, now I'm always a little bit timid about taking this expansion, because too often I've tried to move out to clear off the Overlord or the Zerglings and I got intercepted by a bunch of Banelings, and stim isn't done so I can't really kite. I guess I'm a little bit too timid for my own good. It did delay my expansion a little bit more than what it should be. Right, so we'll be moving out here, and of course our opponent is going for a Muta play. Good creep spread. Good creep spread. Right, so we again want to creep out the creep spread. And we're going to flee with some of our army to make our opponent either chase with his, which he does. He leaves these Marauders alone when we're going to do whatever we can with them. Not the best splits by me, but that's okay. We still take care of most of his army. And behind this, we actually take out our opponent's third. We're going to deny some more creep because why not? If we can stop the creep spread at his base, there's no way that he's going to have enough creep to help him with these engagements. And we do lose some Marauders, but that's okay. We did enough damage. The most important thing that we did was we took out the hatchery, because since we took out our opponent's economy, there's no way he can continue making these +3/+3 upgrades. He doesn't have enough economy to transition into the hive that's required, and then continue with +3/+3. So we're going to catch up slowly but surely. We're going to catch up on the upgrades front, and once we do, we're in really good position, because we're going to have the economic edge. We're going to have an upgrade advantage, or at least equally on that, and we're going to have the army for it. And you can see the creep receding, and our opponent is going for a heavy Muta play. Now, whenever you're going against heavy Muta, there's always a couple things you have to keep in mind. And I learned how to play against Mutas just from Hallie, because he's so awesome. So, you always want to engage as many times as you can around your opponent's main base to try and bring the Mutas to engage your main army. So over here, our opponent brings everything he can, gets a good connection with the Banelings, and we're going to see what we can do with our Marauders. The Marauders, with the +2/+2, have a good amount of armor, so it takes forever for opponent's Mutas to take out the Marauders. In between that, you can usually take out maybe a base, maybe a second base if you really want to. Right, so behind this, our opponent is going to try and get a fourth up to try and compensate. Right, in the end though, our opponent is going to try and get some Muta harassment done. Now, if there's one thing that Hobby taught me, especially in TVZ, is that every time your opponent attacks with Mutas, you want to counterattack. You almost never want to defend because, well, your opponent will almost never let you engage this Muta flock. The only reason you want to defend is if you're stalling for the upgrades to finish, or if you want to stall to let your SCVs get into the safety of your marine numbers. Other than that, you always want to be attacking. Just because your opponent, especially if he's going for high numbers, doesn't have enough in his home bases to defend. So he needs to bring the Mutas and he needs to force an engagement. Well, it's good for us when he does that, because as a Zerg player, you never want to engage the main army with some Mutas. So of course we're going to be engaging. Always engage with the Marauders in the front. Always try not to stim the Marauders, unless you're going for mass riches, just because against light units like the Banelings and the Lings, the Marauders are better at tanking the damage more than dealing the damage. Our opponent is trying to get what he can done, but he can't really get that much. And he's at risk of losing a lot of stuff here, so he has to bring the Mutas home. This always happens against Zerg players. So we take care of all the Banelings before they can connect to anything. Our opponent is going to try and get rid of the Marines, but loses the natural because of that. Right, so from here on out, our opponent has lost the natural and the third, so he doesn't really have much hope for economy. I'm going to try and do whatever he can, but again, we do have turrets to try to get this up. Since our opponent is attacking, the main thing we want to do is harass. We want to try and bring our opponent to force an engagement. If our opponent does not, it's a base race scenario, and Mutalist DPS is pretty terrible. Well, I mean, it's not half bad, but one-on-one DPS is pretty bad, especially if you compare to the DPS of our army. It's pretty huge, the difference that exists. So we kill off the Baneling Nest. Our opponent is forced to engage with Mutalisks and Zerglings, and he's going to force an engagement with Mutas. We have Bio, or rather Marines, to deal with this. And with +3/+3, you don't really need to... We don't need superior amounts of Marines. As long as you have one Marine per one Mutas, you can pretty much take out the Mutaflock. So, morals to take away from this game. Well, one, Halby is awesome. That's always one thing. That's always one good thing. And secondly, whenever your opponent engages with the Mutalisk, whenever he tries to harass, always remember, counterattack is the best way to take care of big Mutaflocks. Especially once the number of Mutas reaches like critical mass to be able to like take out the missile turrets, take out every sort of defense. Especially if you try to split your army into small groups of Marines to defend at many locations. Once the once the Mutaflock reaches critical numbers, that's not really effective anymore. So I hope this was informative for you guys. Hope you guys liked it, and I guess I'll see you guys next time. Have a great weekend, and bye bye for now.